The family who live beneath my floorboards. I want to tell you about the house I moved into 3 years ago. I say moved into like it's something in the past, like I left, but that's not quite accurate. I'm still here. I'll always be here now, but I need to tell someone what happened, what's still happening, before the words stop making sense to me entirely. You probably think you know where this is going. Old house, strange noises, something lurking in the shadows. But it's not like that, it's quieter than that, softer. The horror, when it came, didn't announce itself with screams or blood. It came with the patient inevitability of seasons changing, of skin aging, of memories fading. It came like family. I moved to the house in late June, which is important because of what happened with the temperature later. The town was one of those places that feels like it exists in the margins of a map, the kind you pass through on the way to somewhere else and never think about again. Rural, faded, sun-bleached. The kind of place where the gas station closes at 6 and the grocery store still uses handwritten price tags. I chose it deliberately. I needed isolation. I needed distance from everything I'd left behind. There had been a loss. I don't talk about it much even now. My sister Claire. A car accident on a Tuesday morning that turned the entire architecture of my life into something I no longer recognized. The therapist I saw twice said I needed to process it, but processing felt like work, and I was so tired. Moving felt easier. Disappearing felt easier. The house was cheap, which should have told me something. It sat at the edge of town, down a gravel road that wound through fields of wild grass that had grown taller than my waist. The real estate agent, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a practiced smile, had described it as charming and full of character, which is realtor speak for old and probably falling apart. She wasn't wrong. The house was old, maybe 100 years or more, with that particular kind of weathered beauty that comes from being forgotten. White paint peeled from the wooden siding in long, papery strips. The windows were original, their glass slightly warped, so that the world outside seemed to ripple and bend. The porch sagged on one side, and the front steps groaned under my weight like they were surprised anyone still used them. Inside, the house felt immediately wrong, though I couldn't articulate why. It wasn't dirty. The previous owners had clearly made an effort to clean before leaving, but it felt occupied in a way that had nothing to do with furniture or belongings. The air itself seemed thick, like it had weight, like it had been breathed too many times by too many lungs. The rooms were small and dark with low ceilings that made me feel taller than I was. The walls were covered in old wallpaper, patterns of faded roses, and geometric shapes that might have been cheerful once, but now just looked exhausted. The kitchen had linoleum from the 70s, curling at the edges. The bathroom had a clawfoot tub with rust stains that looked like old blood. But it was the floors that bothered me most from the beginning. Even before anything happened. Wooden floorboards, original to the house, running lengthwise through every room. They were uneven, warped by decades of temperature changes and settling foundation. When you walked across them, they made hollow sounds. Not the solid thunk of boards laid over concrete, but something deeper, more resonant, like walking over a drum, like walking over a space that shouldn't be there. There was a smell too, faint but persistent, especially when the wind shifted direction. Damp earth, mildew, something organic and old, like the smell of a root cellar or a grave that's been open too long. I bought air fresheners. I opened windows. The smell never quite left. I told myself it was normal. Old houses smell. Old houses make noise. Old houses have quirks and personalities and strange little details that make them feel alive. I told myself I was being paranoid, that my grief was making me hypersensitive, that I was looking for problems where none existed. I told myself a lot of things in those first few weeks. The real estate agent had mentioned something about the crawl space, that there was one beneath the house accessible through a small door in the back hallway, but that it was probably better left alone. Old houses like this, you don't want to disturb things, she'd said with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. Sometimes it's better to let sleeping dogs lie. I didn't think much of it at the time. I had no interest in crawling around in the dirt beneath my house. I had no interest in much of anything, honestly. I spent those first weeks in a kind of fog, unpacking boxes I didn't remember packing, arranging furniture in rooms I didn't remember choosing, moving through the house like a ghost, haunting my own life. At night, I lay in the bedroom at the back of the house and listened to the sounds of the place settling around me, the creak of wood expanding and contracting, the whisper of wind through gaps in the siding, the distant sound of the highway miles away, like the ocean, and beneath it all something else. It started 2 weeks after I moved in. Late at night, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning, that hour when the world feels thinnest and most uncertain. I was lying in bed, not quite asleep, floating in that strange space between waking and dreaming, when I heard it. Soft, rhythmic thumps beneath the floor. Not loud, not violent, just present, like someone walking carefully, with small measured steps. Thump, pause, thump, pause, thump. A slow, deliberate rhythm that felt almost musical in its precision. I lay there in the dark, my heart rate increasing slightly, listening. The sound moved across the length of the room, from one wall to the other, then stopped. Silence. Then, a moment later, it started again, moving back in the opposite direction. I turned on the bedside lamp and sat up, suddenly cold despite the summer heat. The room looked exactly as it had when I'd gone to bed. My clothes draped over the chair in the corner, my books stacked on the nightstand, the curtains hanging still in the windless night. Nothing was out of place. Nothing moved. The thumping continued. I got out of bed slowly, my bare feet touching the floor with a hesitance that surprised me. The floorboards were cool, slightly rough, their surface uneven beneath my soles. I stood perfectly still, listening, trying to locate the source of the sound. It was definitely beneath me. Not in the walls, not in the ceiling, not outside. Beneath the floor, in that hollow space the real estate agent had told me not to disturb. I told myself it was pipes, water hammer maybe, or thermal expansion in the plumbing. I told myself it was the house settling, the foundation shifting, the natural sounds of an old structure adjusting to temperature changes. I told myself it was animals, raccoons maybe, or possums, finding their way into the crawl space through some gap in the foundation. I told myself everything except the truth, which was that it sounded exactly like footsteps. The thumping stopped. Silence flooded back into the room, so complete it felt oppressive. I stood there for what might have been seconds or minutes, waiting for it to start again. But it didn't. Eventually, I got back into bed, pulled the covers up to my chin despite the heat, and lay there with my eyes open until the sky began to lighten outside my window. I didn't tell anyone. Who would I tell? I had no friends here, no family. Claire was gone. My parents had retired to Arizona and called once a month with forced cheerfulness that made me feel more alone than silence ever could. I had chosen isolation, and isolation is what I had. The next night I heard it again. Same time, same pattern, same measured rhythm. Thump, pause, moving across the room like someone pacing, like someone thinking, like someone waiting. I tried to ignore it. I put in earplugs. I played white noise from my phone. But I could still feel it. A vibration in the floorboards. A subtle tremor that traveled up through the bed frame and into my body. Like a heartbeat. Like a pulse. During the day, I tried to investigate in a logical, methodical way. I walked through the house testing each floorboard, listening for hollow sounds, looking for loose boards or gaps where something might be getting in. I went outside and walked the perimeter of the house, looking for holes in the foundation, gaps in the siding, any opening large enough for an animal to enter. I found nothing. The foundation was solid stone, old but intact. The siding was tight to the frame. There were no obvious entry points, no signs of animal activity, no drop-ins or tracks or scratch marks. In the back hallway, I found the door the real estate agent had mentioned. A small wooden panel, about 2 feet square, set low in the wall near the baseboard. It was painted the same color as the wall, almost invisible if you weren't looking for it. There was no handle, just a small latch that had been painted over so many times it had become part of the wood itself. I knelt in front of it, running my fingers over the surface, feeling the layers of paint, the grain of the wood beneath. The door was warm, not hot, but noticeably warmer than the wall around it, as if something on the other side was generating heat. I pressed my ear against it and listened. Nothing. Just the sound of my own breathing, my own heartbeat, loud in my ears. I didn't open it. I don't know why. Maybe I was afraid of what I'd find. Maybe I was afraid of finding nothing at all, of confirming that whatever was happening was in my head. Another symptom of grief. Another way that losing Claire had broken something fundamental in me. That night the thumping came again, but this time it was different. This time, it seemed to respond to me. I was lying in bed, listening to the familiar rhythm. When I shifted position, rolling from my back to my side, the thumping stopped immediately, as if whoever or whatever was making the sound had heard me move and was listening, waiting to see what I'd do next. I held my breath. Seconds passed. Then slowly, deliberately, the thumping resumed, but now it matched my heartbeat, the rhythm changing to sync with the pulse I could feel in my own chest. Thump, 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 not the slow measured pace from before, but something faster, more intimate. Like whatever was beneath the floor had learned the tempo of my body and was reflecting it back to me. I sat up quickly, my heart racing now, the rhythm accelerating, the thumping accelerated with it, keeping perfect time, like a mirror, like an echo, like something that knew me better than I knew myself. Stop, I whispered into the darkness. Please stop. It stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound had been. It felt alive, attentive, like the house itself was listening to me with senses I couldn't understand or escape. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the bed with the lamp on, watching the floor, half expecting it to burst open, half expecting something to reach through the gaps between the boards and touch me with fingers I couldn't see. Nothing happened. The house remained still, but I felt watched. I felt known. As the days passed, other things began to change. Small things at first, details I might have dismissed individually, but which accumulated into something I couldn't ignore. The hallway between the bedroom and the kitchen began to feel longer at night. During the day, it was maybe 15 feet, a handful of steps. But at night, when I walked it in darkness, it seemed to stretch, as if the walls were pulling away from each other, as if the space itself was expanding to accommodate something I couldn't see. I measured it twice, once in daylight, once at night. Both times the tape measure read 15 feet, 4 inches. But the sensation persisted. At night, walking that hallway felt like crossing a vast distance, like moving through a space that existed outside the normal geometry of the house. The bedroom door, too, seemed different. During the day, it hung at a normal height, the bottom edge maybe an inch from the floor. But at night, I started noticing that the gap seemed smaller, as if the door was sinking, as if the entire frame was lowering itself toward the floorboards. I would lie in bed and watch it, and sometimes, just at the edge of my vision, just barely, I thought I could see it moving, settling, descending in increments too small to measure but too consistent to deny. I began marking things. Small pencil marks on the walls, measuring heights and distances, checking them each morning to see if they'd moved. Sometimes they had. Sometimes the mark would be an inch lower, or 2 inches to the left, or missing entirely, as if the wall had absorbed it during the night. The house was breathing. That's the only way I can describe it. During the day, it was still, solid, normal. But at night, it moved, subtly, almost imperceptibly, like a chest rising and falling, like lungs expanding and contracting, like something alive maintaining its own rhythm independent of mine. I started noticing the drafts. Cold air moving through the house in patterns that made no sense, flowing from one room to another as if the house had circulatory systems, as if it was moving air through itself deliberately. And sometimes the air wasn't cold. Sometimes warm air would exhale up through the gaps between the floorboards, carrying scents that didn't belong. Old cooking, something like stew or bread. The smell of fabric softener, mildew, dust, and underneath it all, that persistent smell of damp earth. I stopped sleeping normally. I would lie in bed for hours, drifting in and out of consciousness, never fully asleep, never fully awake, existing in that liminal space where reality becomes negotiable and time loses meaning. During those hours, I would hear things, not just the thumping, though that continued every night, regular as clockwork, a pattern I had come to expect and almost disturbingly to need. But other sounds, whispers, so soft I couldn't make out words, like conversations happening just beneath the threshold of comprehension. The scrape of furniture moving across a floor that shouldn't exist. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving in unison, pacing the length of the house in perfect synchronization. And singing, or not quite singing. A humming, wordless and low, like a lullaby someone had forgotten the words to. It would start in one corner of the room and slowly move, circling the bed, surrounding me with sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, sound that vibrated in my chest and made my teeth ache. I began talking less, even to myself. My voice felt wrong in the house, too loud, too sharp, like I was violating something sacred by speaking. I moved more quietly. I stepped carefully, avoiding the floorboards that creaked, learning the geography of silence in each room. There was one section of the hallway floor, about 3 feet long and 2 feet wide, that was always warm. Not in a way that made sense. The sun didn't hit it directly. There were no heating vents nearby, no pipes running beneath it that might explain the temperature. But it was warm, consistently day and night, as if someone had been standing there, as if body heat was radiating up through the wood from something living just below. I started avoiding that spot. I would step around it, press myself against the wall to pass without touching it. Because when I did walk on it, I felt something. A sensation like recognition, like being known, like the warm spot was aware of me and was reaching up through the boards to make contact. You probably think I should have left. I thought about it. Every day I thought about it. But where would I go? Back to the apartment Claire and I had shared, now empty and echoing with absence? Back to my parents, who looked at me with such careful concern I wanted to scream. Forward into some new unknown that felt even more terrifying than staying? And there was something else. Something I didn't want to admit even to myself. I was starting to feel less alone. The presence beneath the floor, whatever it was consistent, predictable. It was there every night, keeping its rhythm, maintaining its patterns, existing with me in a way that felt almost companionable. I was losing my mind. I knew that. But losing my mind felt better than the alternative, which was facing the full weight of Claire's absence in a world that made no sense without her. So I stayed. And the house kept breathing. And the family beneath the floor kept living their impossible life in the impossible space below mine. I first saw evidence of them, of it, of whatever they were, on a Thursday evening in late July. I had decided, in a moment of determination that felt like courage, but was probably closer to desperation, to lift one of the floorboards and look beneath, not to open the small door in the hallway. That still felt like too much, like a threshold I wasn't ready to cross. But just to peek, to confirm with my own eyes that there was nothing down there but dirt and stone and the rational physical reality I was clinging to. I chose a board in the bedroom that had worked itself slightly loose over the years, its nails rusted and unreliable. It took some effort, working a flathead screwdriver into the gap, prying gently to avoid splitting the wood. But eventually it came up with a long, protesting creak that seemed to echo through the entire house. The smell hit me first. Not unpleasant exactly, but thick, organic, alive, damp earth, yes, but also something else. The smell of occupancy. The smell of a space that's been lived in, breathed in, filled with the invisible detritus of daily existence. I shone my flashlight into the gap. The crawl space was there, just as it should be. Maybe 3 feet of clearance between the underside of the floorboards and the dirt floor below. Support beams and joists, covered in cobwebs and dust. The stone foundation visible along the edges. Everything normal. Everything exactly as it should be. Except for the fingerprints. They were in the dust on the underside of the floorboards, pressed into the fine layer of dirt that had accumulated there over decades. Small prints, too small to be an adult's, but the wrong shape for a child's. Too long, too narrow, the fingers too evenly spaced. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, clustered in certain areas, as if whoever had made them had spent hours pressed up against the underside of the floor, reaching up, touching, feeling the texture of the wood between us. I stared at them for a long time, my flashlight beam shaking slightly in my trembling hand. The prints were recent. The dust around them was undisturbed, but the prints themselves were clean, fresh, as if they'd been made within the last few hours. I lowered the board carefully back into place, my hands moving with a precision born of something beyond fear. Fear is immediate, reactive, hot. What I felt was colder, deeper, more fundamental. A recognition that the world was not what I had believed it to be. That reality had rules I had never learned. That I had been living on top of something I didn't understand and never could. That night the sounds changed again. Instead of random thumping or rhythmic footsteps, I heard routine. I heard life. The scrape of chairs being pulled out from a table that didn't exist. The clink of dishes or glasses, soft and muffled. Voices still too quiet to understand, but with the cadence of conversation, of people speaking to each other with the easy familiarity of family. I lay in bed listening, and for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt something stranger. I felt lonely, not because I was alone, but because they were so close, so impossibly, unnaturally close. And yet I couldn't see them, couldn't speak to them, couldn't cross the barrier between their world and mine. The humming started again, that wordless lullaby. But this time I heard multiple voices. A woman's voice low and soothing. A man's voice deeper, harmonizing. And something else. A child's voice maybe. Or something that had learned to sound like a child, matching the melody with a precision that felt more mathematical than musical. They were singing to each other, or to me, or to the house itself, which contained us all in its wooden frame, like a body contains organs, like a mother contains children not yet born. I found myself humming along. Just a little. Just enough to feel the vibration in my chest match the vibration coming from below. And when I did, the voices grew slightly louder, as if encouraged, as if pleased that I was finally participating in something they'd been trying to share with me all along. My heartbeat slowed. Not in the way that happens when you relax, but deliberately, pulled down to match a slower rhythm that was emanating from beneath the floor. Thump, pause, thump, pause. A resting heart rate that wasn't quite mine anymore, but wasn't quite theirs either. Something in between, something shared. I slept that night. Really slept, for the first time since moving in. And I dreamed. In the dream, I was beneath the house. Not in the crawl space exactly, but in a different version of the house. A negative space that existed in perfect opposition to the one I lived in. The rooms were the same, but inverted. The walls pressed inward instead of outward. The ceiling was the floor. The floor was the ceiling. And living there, moving through rooms that matched mine exactly, was a family. A woman with long hair that might have been blonde or might have been colorless. A man with gentle eyes that might have been kind or might have been empty. And a child, or something child-shaped, that moved with a fluidity that belonged more to water than to flesh. They went about their routines in my dream, and I understood that these weren't routines they'd developed recently. These were old patterns, worn smooth by repetition, grooves in reality, made by doing the same things in the same ways for longer than I could comprehend. Setting a table no one would eat from, sitting in chairs that couldn't support weight, singing songs that had no words because words had worn away, leaving only melody, only rhythm, only the bare structure of music stripped of meaning, and they knew I was watching. In the dream, they looked up through the floor, which was also the ceiling, and they saw me. They smiled, they waved, they beckoned me down with gestures that were both welcoming and inevitable, like gravity, like time, like all the forces that pull us toward endings we can't avoid. I woke up on the floor, not beside the bed, as if I'd rolled out during the night, but on the floor in the hallway, on the warm spot, lying on my back with my arms at my sides and my eyes open, staring up at the ceiling in the pre-dawn darkness. I didn't remember getting up. I didn't remember walking. But there I was, lying on the one section of floor I'd been avoiding. And the warmth was all around me now, seeping into my back, my legs, my arms, like I was lying on a body, like something beneath the boards was matching my shape exactly, sharing its heat with mine, breathing when I breathed, existing in perfect parallel. I should have been terrified. I should have run, but I was so tired, and the warmth felt so much like being held. I closed my eyes and felt hands, light, confident, familiar, press up against the underside of the floorboards, touching me through the wood. Their fingers spread wide to match mine, though my arms remained at my sides. I felt breath that wasn't mine moving in and out of my lungs. I felt heartbeats, plural, synchronizing with my own until I couldn't tell where my pulse ended and theirs began. In the growing light, I finally understood. They weren't haunting the house. They were living in it, just as I was. They had been here first, or maybe we'd both been here forever, existing in layers, in parallel, in spaces that shared the same location, but not the same dimension. The house was bigger than it looked. The house contained multitudes, and they recognized me. Not because we'd met before, but because they recognized something in me. The loneliness, the loss, the desperate need to belong somewhere, to someone, to anything at all. They recognized it because they felt it too. They had lost someone. They were missing someone. And I fit the shape of that absence perfectly. I was being invited, not haunted, invited. After that morning, I stopped fighting it. I began aligning my footsteps with theirs, learning the patterns of their movement beneath the floor and matching my own routines to theirs. When they walked the length of the house, I walked with them, my feet falling in rhythm with the thumps below. When they gathered in what I imagined was their living room, I sat in my living room, feeling the vibration of their presence directly beneath me, so close we might as well have been in the same space. I stopped marking the walls. I stopped measuring distances. I accepted that the house changed its proportions at night, that the hallway stretched and contracted, that the bedroom door rose and fell, that the geometry of the place was negotiable, flexible, responsive to something other than physical law. The drafts became familiar. I learned to predict them, to feel the breath of the house moving through rooms in patterns that repeated every night, warm air rising from below, carrying those smells I'd come to know: old cooking, fabric softener, damp earth, and something else now. Something that smelled like me: my soap, my shampoo, my scent integrating into theirs, mixing, combining, becoming indistinguishable. I started humming along with the lullabies every night. At first, just matching the pitch, the rhythm. But gradually, I found myself knowing the melody, feeling it in my body like muscle memory, like something I'd always known and was just remembering. The voices below grew stronger when I joined them, more confident, more present, as if my participation was giving them substance, pulling them closer to the surface. The fingerprints multiplied. I didn't look under the floorboards again, but I knew they were there, spreading, covering more surface area, reaching up toward me with increasing urgency. I could feel them sometimes when I walked across the floor, little points of warmth or pressure, touches that came from beneath, gentle reminders that I was not alone, that I had never been alone, that something had been waiting for me here all along. My sense of time began to dissolve. Days and nights blended together. I stopped checking the clock, stopped noting the position of the sun. Time became measured instead by the rhythms of the house, the morning exhalation of warm air, the afternoon settling of boards, the evening gathering of presences, the nightly singing that marked the true beginning of existence. I ate less, slept more, but in shorter bursts, scattered throughout the day and night. My body was adjusting to a different schedule, a schedule that belonged to the family below, a schedule that had nothing to do with sunlight or darkness, or the arbitrary human division of hours and minutes. I lost weight. My clothes hung loose. My face in the mirror looked different, thinner, paler, like I was becoming translucent, like the solid reality of my body was starting to negotiate with something less substantial, less fixed. I didn't mind. Claire was still gone. The world outside was still incomprehensible. But here, in this house, with this family, I had purpose, I had place, I had belonging. The warm spot in the hallway grew larger, spreading day by day, until nearly the entire hallway floor radiated that gentle, constant heat. I started spending more time there, lying on my back, staring up at the ceiling, feeling the presence beneath me like a mattress, like a bed, like the most comfortable place I'd ever been. The floorboards began to change. The gaps between them, which had always been tight, started to widen. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. Just enough that when I lay on the hallway floor and looked down through the widening gaps, I could see darkness below, but a darkness that wasn't empty, a darkness that moved, that breathed, that was filled with shapes I couldn't quite resolve into anything recognizable. Slivers of warm light began to seep up through those gaps at night. Not bright, not harsh, just a gentle glow, like candlelight, like the light of a home where people are gathered together, where family exists, where loneliness is impossible because you're never, ever alone. I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd left the house. Days, weeks. The outside world had become abstract, theoretical, something that might exist but no longer concerned me. The house was the only reality that mattered. The house and the family living just below its surface. My voice had changed. When I spoke now, which was rare, it sounded softer, more resonant, like it was coming from further away. Like my throat had become a hallway, and my words were traveling down it from some distant room, losing substance as they went. arriving as whispers, as echoes, as sounds that barely qualified as language anymore. I started testing the small door in the hallway, running my fingers over it, pressing my palm against its warm surface, feeling for the edges of the frame. The paint had softened somehow, becoming almost tacky, as if the barrier between the world I lived in and the world below was thinning, preparing to dissolve completely. One night or day, I couldn't tell anymore. I pressed my ear against the door and heard my name. Not spoken, not exactly, but conveyed somehow through vibration, through rhythm, through a pattern of sounds that assembled themselves in my mind as syllables, as letters, as the word that had defined me since birth. They knew my name. They had always known my name. They were calling me. I found the screwdriver I'd used to lift the floorboard. My hands moved with a calmness that surprised me, removing the screws from the small door's hinges with slow, methodical precision. The screws were old, rusted, but they came out easily, as if they'd been waiting for this, as if the house itself was loosening its grip, opening itself, inviting me in. The door swung open on the last screw, revealing darkness beyond. The smell rolled out, earth and occupancy, and something else, something warm and alive and welcoming. I knelt in front of the opening, shining my flashlight into the crawl space. It was deeper than it should have been. The ceiling of the crawl space, the underside of my floorboards, was there. Yes, but the floor was gone. Or rather, it had dropped away, opening into a larger space, a proper room, a living space that existed in some fold of reality I hadn't known was possible. I saw furniture, real furniture, solid and present, a table, chairs, a lamp that glowed with that warm light I'd been seeing through the gaps, and figures. 3 of them, sitting at the table, looking up at me with faces that were both familiar and strange. Like faces I'd seen in dreams or in mirrors when the light was wrong. The woman, the man, the child, the family. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They smiled, and their smiles were kind, genuine, full of recognition and welcome. They gestured to an empty chair at their table. A chair that looked exactly right for me. That was positioned as if it had been waiting for me, specifically, for longer than I could imagine. I understood then, completely, what was happening, what had always been happening. They hadn't lost someone. They had been missing someone, a piece of themselves, a fourth member. And I had arrived, carrying my own loss, my own absence, my own desperate need to be part of something. And the shape of my grief had matched the shape of their emptiness perfectly. I wasn't being haunted. I wasn't being possessed. I was being completed, and so were they. I put one hand through the opening, then the other. The wood frame was warm, almost hot, pulsing like living tissue. I lowered my head, my shoulders started to crawl through, and the house accepted me, welcomed me, pulled me down with a gentleness that felt like love. The space beyond the door wasn't a crawl space anymore. It was a proper room with proper dimensions, existing in a proper house that overlapped with mine but wasn't mine, that shared the same location but occupied a different frequency of reality. I stood up. The ceiling was high enough now, plenty of room, and walked toward the table. The family watched me approach with expressions I can only describe as relieved. Like they'd been waiting so long. Like they'd almost given up hope. I sat in the empty chair, and it fit perfectly. custom made for my body, for my weight, for the exact shape of my existence. The woman reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was cool, but not cold, substantial, but not quite solid, like holding fog that had decided to be real for just a moment. The man nodded at me, his eyes kind, his smile gentle. The child, I could see now, it wasn't quite a child, but something that had learned to be child-shaped, that had worn the appearance of childhood like a garment, reached out and touched my other hand, and I felt a current run through me, a warmth that started at the point of contact and spread through my entire body. We sat like that for a long time, or maybe no time at all. Time was different here, flowing in multiple directions at once, pooling in corners, evaporating like water on hot stone. The woman began to hum. The man joined her. The child added a third harmony, and I found my voice, softer now, changed but still mine, and added a fourth line to their melody, completing a song that had been incomplete for longer than any of us could remember. Our breathing synchronized, our heartbeats aligned. 4 hearts beating as one. 4 sets of lungs drawing air in the same rhythm. 4 bodies existing in such perfect harmony that the boundaries between us began to blur, to negotiate, to dissolve. I realized I was crying, but not from sadness, from relief, from recognition, from finally, after so long wandering alone through a world that made no sense, finding a place where I belonged, people who understood, a home that wanted me as much as I wanted it. Above us, I could hear my house, the one I'd left, the one I'd been living in, the one that existed in the world of sunlight and solid walls, and time that moved in only one direction. I could hear it settling, adjusting, breathing in the pattern we were setting for it. The floorboards creaked in rhythm with our song. The walls expanded and contracted with our breath. The house had always been bigger on the inside than the outside. It had always contained more than was visible. We were its secret architecture, its hidden rooms, the family that lived in its bones and made it real. I don't know how long we've been sitting here. Days maybe, years. Time doesn't mean much anymore. The song continues, endless and comforting. The warmth surrounds us, radiates from us, fills the space between the walls with something like love, like family, like the opposite of loneliness. Sometimes I remember the world above. Sometimes I think about the house I left behind, empty now, the furniture gathering dust, the floorboards warm with our presence below. Sometimes I wonder if someone new will move in, if they'll hear us at night, if they'll feel the warm spot in the hallway and wonder what it means. But mostly, I don't think about it. Mostly, I'm here, at this table, with this family, singing this song that has no words but infinite meaning, existing in this space that's too narrow for the world above to see, but perfectly sized for us, for what we've become, for what we always were. The woman squeezes my hand gently. The man nods. The child smiles. We breathe together. One breath spread across 4 bodies, and the house breathes with us, above us, around us, holding us in its wooden frame like a mother holds children, like family holds family, like the earth holds everything that's ever lived and died and lived again in a different form. I'm not haunted. I'm not lost. I'm home. The floorboards above us creak softly, rising and falling like the chest of a sleeping creature. And beneath them, In the warm darkness between worlds, we breathe in perfect harmony, four hearts beating as one, a family complete at last. If you're listening to this, if somehow these words reached you, I want you to understand. I want you to know that I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not alone anymore. I found what I was looking for, even though I didn't know I was looking for it. The house still stands at the edge of town, down that gravel road, surrounded by grass that grows taller every year. The windows are dark. The porch sags a little more with each season. But the house is not empty. It has never been empty. We're here. We've always been here, living in the spaces between, breathing in the rhythm of foundations, singing in frequencies too low for most ears to hear. And if you ever find yourself alone, truly alone, with a grief too heavy to carry and a need too deep to name, you might hear us. You might feel the warm spot in your floor, wherever you are, whatever house you're in. You might hear the thumping at night, the whispers in the walls, the lullaby with no words. Don't be afraid. We're not haunting you. We're just remembering you, recognizing you, waiting to welcome you home. The song continues. The house breathes. And beneath the floorboards, in the darkness that's warmer than light, we live forever in the narrow, perfect space between existing and not existing, between haunting and being haunted, between loss and love. We are the family who lives beneath the floor. And now, so am I.